Hello, this is Primal Jquay, and I'm going to talk about more gaming news that I've kind of selected, as I usually do. And it's just about a couple of recent things that happened, and both of them that I have a few feelings about, and a couple of opinions about, which pretty much follow a pattern dating a fair ways back. This is basically just a continuation of these things. The first thing I do want to talk about, which I'm sure by now a lot of you are aware, that Nintendo has launched their Switch Online service, which is pretty much the first time on any Nintendo platform that you are asked to pay a subscription fee to play online with your friends and other randoms. Of course, this is something that we knew was coming since before the Switch's launch, when they did the reveal in 2017. I did actually point out at one point that we were going to pay for online, and this is essentially following a pattern that has been going on since the launch of Microsoft's entry into the console race, the Xbox. The Xbox launched way back in late 2001, and even then they put forward at that point that there was going to be an online service for that platform called Xbox Live, and this was going to be much better than the existing ones that you got on the PlayStation 2, even though that was very, very bare bones, and the Sega Dreamcast, which was pretty much the first console that offered online services. I know it was on dial-up, but that's where that essentially came from. But Microsoft's offering was going to be a heck of a lot more sort of integrated into the system overall. It would tie better with games. You get more advanced features like voice chat and stuff like that, and you had better connection as well. And all of this was topped off at the point where we were made aware that you had to pay a subscription fee from it, which by that time was about $50 a year. You were essentially paying not necessarily just to play online. There was a whole ton of other features that it had, including being able to implement patches and downloadable content online, digital purchases, of course, stuff, social stuff like party chat and invited friends lists. So all of that obviously had to be, as far as they're concerned, paid for. And that developed even further with the Xbox 360, when they sort of introduced stuff like avatars and Xbox Live Arcade, and even more sort of media-centric things like sort of YouTube and Netflix and all of that kind of stuff. Not forgetting, of course, stuff like achievements, game score, cloud storage, and the like. Of course, I'm talking about the Xbox Live Gold package. The Xbox Live Silver package existed, but that was just mostly social features and not necessarily being able to play online with that. Now, as you know, the PlayStation didn't really have a network service that you could call a network service up until the PlayStation 3, when they launched the PlayStation Network in 2006, and that had a wealth of features as well, but that time online play was completely free. There was a few additional features that you'd actually get with it anyway, like your friends lists, your voice chat, trophies and stuff like that. But again, that was peer-to-peer kind of stuff, although with that and the Xbox 360, it was kind of possible to tie in a game with dedicated servers. It's just something that had to be done between Xbox and Sony PlayStation and the developers or publishers of the game. But up until 2012, I think it was, or 2013, I completely forget that one. It might be even further than that. Sony had been offering that service for free up until PlayStation Plus launched, in which you had to pay online, but you also had the benefit of being able to get stuff like a free game every month and share play, stuff like that. So at that point, Sony had jumped on to the sort of paid subscription to play online model that carried Xbox Live as the sort of the premium online service for consoles for so long. Now, when it comes to Nintendo, their online service was from the launch of Nintendo DS's Wi-Fi service, which launched in late 2005, and that was extremely bare bones. The actual services it only produced were really down to the actual games themselves. Stuff like lobbies and voice chat and all that was sort of integrated into the game, and anything else that needed to go into it had to be sort of maintained by publishers and developers. Again, there wasn't like a sort of one place they could go to put it all in, like with Xbox Live and PSN. It wasn't all integrated into one. The only way you could connect with your friends was friend codes, which were just like 16-digit hex codes that I use. I think it's 16-digit. I have to look it up because I don't particularly use them that much myself. That kind of identifies you as a unique player over the network. And that was all totally free. There was no extra features, like I said, in the system itself. It developed over time when the Wii came out. Eventually, you were able to actually connect to systems through an internet account, whereas before it was all your identity and that kind of stuff was tied to the hardware. And eventually you got the Nintendo Network ID, which held basic information of yourself and your avatar, which is, was your me. That was introduced with the Wii when that came out. And it was just all extremely cheap and nasty online, and pretty much marked Nintendo as kind of like the black sheep when it came to online gaming. The justification for that was that it was all completely, totally free. You didn't have to pay for pretty much anything other than digital purchases and stuff like that. You didn't even get its storefront until the Wii shopping channel, where you could purchase titles from the Virtual Console and WiiWare, and then DSiWare followed, and then after that kind of developed into the eShop, where that was kind of unified between the Wii U and the 3DS. But beyond that, you didn't have to pay for anything. Until the Switch came along, and as you know, on the 18th of September this year, the Switch Online service launched. Now, as you know, if you saw the Nintendo Direct, what that was offering was essentially online play, free NES game every month, as long as you pay for the subscription, backing up your game saves to the cloud, which is pretty much the only way you can back up your save unless you do some homebrew, jiggery, pokery shenanigans kind of stuff, and extra perks that they just hasn't actually detailed much yet in the direct, but they said they'll release details about that later. And that is actually all for a nice cheap price, about $20 a year or about $4 a month. So it's the cheapest of the services. Oh, and of course, stuff like lobbies and sort of party chat and that is all done through a phone app, which has been available since not far from the launch of the Switch. I think came out in September 2017. I have to check up on that in complete total honesty. But that's kind of what I want to talk about, because I will say this right now, I've never been an advocate of paying to play online. I don't necessarily see the reason for it. I know, in the sense that it is essentially the platform holders offering their services, their expertise to be able to assist with getting games online and people to play online with each other through these games, and sort of taking some of the heat off like third-party publishers in doing so. That's why they have those integrated online systems. And, that's all kind of the stuff that they're asking you to sort of pay for the support in actually running those services. But I look on the PC and essentially there's stuff like that exists. There's, Steam, obviously. It started off as a support hub for Valve games, and then it kind of expanded from there into a digital storefront, and then started offering all these other services, things like, again, achievements and cloud saves, streaming services. It's kind of developed into a thing, and you don't have to pay a penny. Sony was offering their online play for free as well, but they were competing with Microsoft, meaning that they had to put more value to the services. That's when they started charging for subscriptions and adding all these extra things like the free games and so on and such. Now, Nintendo has seemingly just gone on board with that. Here's the thing though, Microsoft has essentially been doing it from, you can kind of call it the get-go, so they had the most expertise in that area. Sony has also been doing it for a while, and they had kind of the benefit of being able to develop their sort of online thing with the third-party publishers, and so they've developed expertise in that field and know how to put a good system together. Nintendo really much kind of shied away from Microsoft's and Sony's way of doing online in that regard, and didn't really want to do it that way. They kind of wanted to do it in the simplest and cheapest way possible. So a lot of the approaches that they've gone to online has been extremely bare bones and very archaic compared to the other two. And that's been going on for a while, since from Nintendo DS Wi-Fi connection through to Wii Connect 24, through to the Nintendo Network, and up until Switch Online. It's something that they didn't particularly want to touch in terms of actually integrating into the system and then having to run all of these services. They just did it sort of on an individual basis in the games most of the time. And even with stuff like Wii Connect 24, which sounded really promising, but more or less just turned out to be just a sort of automatic update offering a persistent connection with the games that and the interface that was there already. And again, that didn't last very long. When the Wii U came along, it kind of offered that sort of thing anyway. So Nintendo Switch Online is now launched, and a lot of people was really expecting, even though you had to now pay for it, because you've got the extra perks of the cloud save and your free game and so on and such. The online play is still really bare bones. And the fact that you have to do all the lobbies and fight chat and stuff through the app is a really roughshod solution that no one really likes. I've been hearing when they announced it and when everyone was talking about dedicated servers, and I was confused by this because I was like, why would the fact that you're paying for it now mean you be getting dedicated servers? Because you never got that with Xbox Live when it first launched on the original Xbox. You didn't get it with the Xbox 360. Again, like I said, that was kind of an individual publisher kind of basis that they would actually be able to run the dedicated servers. And even now, Xbox Live on the Xbox One, you now do get dedicated servers on a lot of games. That's just the natural progression of the service itself. That's what essentially kind of was born out of paying to play online. It kind of developed to that point. So expecting Nintendo of all companies to just come out of the fact with a cheap service that's only like 20 quid a year and it be running on dedicated servers doesn't make any sense to me at all whatsoever. I expected it to be as bare bones as it was before. If there was going to be any kind of improvement, it would probably be on whatever protocol they were using at the time, but I seriously doubt that what you're paying for it would actually go towards that. My thing is that what you're paying for essentially is the cloud saving, because that has to be stored somewhere. The free game, I say free in inverted commas because it's not really free. You're paying for it through the subscriptions. And more importantly, the app. And I kind of said this on Twitter, essentially what you're paying for is a subscription to an app on a phone that has all of these sort of neat features of lobbies and voice chats and blah and waff. That's essentially what you're paying for. Pretty much everything else. I mean, you still got friend codes on the thing, for Pete's sakes. You know, you thought they'd have gone with the Nintendo Network ID that you had with that, but no. Obviously, a lot of people have been upset with it, which I completely totally understand. You know, you have a crappy online system and now you're paying for it for things that you may or may not want. You know, again, and like I said, you know, from my point of view, you're essentially paying a subscription for an app and cloud saves, which is nice, but it would also have been nice if there was a way you could back up your saves locally, which Nintendo aren't allowing you to do with the Switch. Even though you can do it with 3DS, you can do it with the Wii U, and so on and such. Like I said before in my sort of sum of the Nintendo Direct, it might have something to do with the Nvidia chips not necessarily being secure enough. But like I said, they've dealt with that. You know, the new systems come out with actual fixes in it that actually fix that problem. But it's still quite poor that you're essentially backing up your saves behind a paywall. So that's what I'm upset about. You know, a lot of people though seem to be upset that it's not using dedicated servers. Personally, if something like PC games can have dedicated servers and be completely free, then why can't it be the same for the Xbox and the PlayStation? But we all know why that is. It's because, like I said, it's all the platform holders providing that service. While with PC games, it's whoever's publishing and running the game and running the servers and, you know, other sort of third parties being able to run that kind of stuff. as well. And that's how it is to expect, a service with a cheap price like that to have dedicated service. The console is kind of crazy. But that said, I wouldn't mind if you could play all consoles online for free. But, Microsoft started that practice, but they're not going to stop it now because it's making them money. Like I said, the system's developed to the point where they have dedicated servers now and so on and such. They're not going to pull back on stuff or something like that. So that's my basic view on the thing. Personally, in terms of value for money, it's kind of an sort of thing because, like I said, the fact that we're getting an NES game is great, but you got stuff like your Virtual Console, your Nintendo Classic Mini, you got myriads of ways of getting NES games, and you're essentially paying for another way to get them, whether you want them or not. As someone who's kind of owned a lot of consoles and kind of bought a lot of virtual console things, that's not really offering me that much value for money. Backing up cloud sales behind a paywall is obscene, so I don't really see that as value for money in all complete honesty. Charging for an app, well, those apps, they're free and kind of ad-based, so it's kind of whether that's sort of the value for money at all. The special offers, I'm kind of interested in what sort of special offers that they'll offer to kind of justify that price, although I think they might just amount to stuff like discounts and stuff that we've been getting already, but I wouldn't really know. So, even paying that £3 a month or whatever it is on our end, I think it's like 17, 18 pounds, I forget, in terms of actually paying for that service a year. Yeah, it's cheap, but in this case, it's not just you get what you're paid for, but you're paying for something that was free before, but you're getting those kind of little carrot on the stick to try and entice you into it. That's personally how I see it. I don't think it's adding that much value. If it was to actually improve online play and the actual services it gets with, which should be integrated into the hardware rather than in the chopping phone app, then I may have a different view of that. The free NES games, it's nice. And like I said, when I saw it on the Nintendo Direct, I was kind of happy that it wasn't just first-party games, also third-party games, and looking further into it, it's going to be an ever-growing library of NES games and possibly Super Nintendo games further on down the line. But even then, it's kind of difficult to see the value in that when you got stuff like the NES Classic Mini and the Super Nintendo Classic Mini out in the wild already. Speaking of classic minis, another announcement came just the following day after the launch of the Switch Online service, and that was from Sony, who announced that they were going to launch a PlayStation Classic Mini in the coming holiday period on 3rd of December 2018. And this is essentially Sony's version of the NES or Super Nintendo Classic Mini. It's basically a smaller box with basically the same kind of design as the original PlayStation, packed with about 20 games. They haven't actually detailed all of the games. They did say that Final Fantasy VII, Ridge Racer Type 4, Tekken 3, and Wild Arms and Jumping Flash would be included in it. You also get a couple of original PlayStation controllers with it, and a USB adapter thing that you just connect straight into any sort of charge point. It doesn't come with actual sort of plug adapter that you can actually plug into your mains, which seems to be standard practice. It almost seems, and what with the NES Classic Mini and the Super Nintendo Classic Mini being the same thing. They're going to be selling this at a price of $99 so a bit more expensive, but then again, it's actually is a more advanced system than the other two. So you can pretty much kind of understand that. And you can kind of also understand that why they're kind of launching the thing, because it's been coming up to, well, not necessarily now, it's 2018 now, so it's about 24 years, I suppose, since the PlayStation came out. And when it did come out, it had a wealth of games, an absolute ton of classic PlayStation franchises and third-party franchises that kind of lasted through the year, and a few of them had seen sort of successful relaunches, such as stuff like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro Dragon, and of course the other ongoing ones like Final Fantasy, Tekken, and Metal Gear. It kind of makes sense for them to sort of cash in on their legacy as Nintendo's been doing, because they have a pretty damn strong legacy in that regard. And that's why I think people who are sort of like coming in and basically saying, oh, Sony's just copying Nintendo again, are kind of missing the point in that regard. This isn't exactly anything new that only Nintendo has done. I will go as far as to say the way Nintendo has done it is that they took their library, they put it in their box, and they're the ones who are kind of selling it. But it's been done before a number of times. You see sort of like old sort of retro games put in boxes and being able to plug into your TV through HDMI and so on and such. There's been tons of those. Been like the bootleg Chinese kind of stuff, of course. You can get those anywhere. Sega did it with the Mega Drive. Well, they didn't actually do it. It was At Games who did it, and I know their stuff has been reportedly really poor in that regard in terms of like build quality and emulation and so on and such. But again, it's not like it's a new thing. It was something that was bound to happen. So I don't see why people are getting so pissy about it, in all complete total honesty. Just because one company does it doesn't mean another company can't do the same thing. If that attitude persisted, then technology would be completely, totally, and utterly stagnant. Technology, engineering, all of that kind of stuff would not have progressed at all. So people saying that only this company is allowed to do such and such a thing and the other guys just copy off them, if they blatantly copied off them without any kind of change or things, yeah, it's copying, but that's for the courts to decide. That's for sort of the plagiarism case to kind of that. You're not judge and jury of that. Yes, okay, it's called the PlayStation Classic, but no, the fact of the matter is PlayStation Classics is a brand. It was something that the old PS1 games that you can get on PS3 and PlayStation Pocket and so on and stuff was kind of branded under. So it is kind of like a continuation of that. That said, my kind of feeling about this being a thing now is kind of one of trepidation, to be completely totally honest, because up until this generation, I mean, I'm not going to say that it was something that permeated through all the generations since gaming was born or anything like that, but it was something that sort of cropped up. First off with like some of the handheld machines, like sort of like the Game Boy to Game Boy Advance to Nintendo DS to 3DS. It also came along with sort of other platforms as well, like for instance the Mega Drive. You could get an attachment. Okay, it was the separate bit of hardware, but with that you could play Master System games on your Mega Drive. I think there was a similar sort of thing for the Sega Saturn, where you could find some way to sort of plug in the Mega Drive cartridge in there. From that point on, you could play PlayStation 1 games on your PlayStation 2. You could, up to a point, play PlayStation 2 games on your PlayStation 3. You could play original Xbox games on the Xbox 360. Then, kind of more recently, up until a point around 2016, 17, I completely forget which part it did came sort of recently there, you could play your Xbox 360 games and your OG Xbox games on Xbox One. And then, of course, I shouldn't be forgetting that you could get digital PSP games and play on the PlayStation Vita, of course. But from that point on, the backwards compatibility sort of trend kind of started going a little bit slow, because Sony cut off PS2 backwards compatibility from the PlayStation 3 after selling it in hardware, transitioning to software emulation, and then afterwards then cutting it out altogether. Basically, I think it was a price thing, because the PlayStation 3 was hideously overpriced when it launched. But with the PlayStation 4, there was none of that. There was like ports of PS3 games that if you had a PS3 games already, you could basically bring that to the PlayStation 4 for free, but it was limited for a few titles. And the only other sort of solution I have is PlayStation Now, which is more kind of a streaming rental service that has honestly a kind of an obscene subscription price to be actually able to run it. No, it's not the best solution for that. And the trend also sort of started with, in terms of the Nintendo consoles, with the Wii, which was backwards compatible with the GameCube, and then following that with the Wii U, which had compatibility with the Wii. The Switch does not have backwards compatibility, neither with the Wii U, which obviously you expect because that's discs in the Switch doesn't have that, or the 3DS, in which you can't actually use the game packs that come with the 3DS. You can't plug that into your Switch because the pins are completely different. And, that along with the fact that the virtual console concept seems to have pretty much ended with the Wii U and the 3DS, kind of means that we don't actually kind of have that backwards compatibility, meaning that essentially, and something that has also been happening very much recently, games companies are now just reselling old games to us in enhanced forms, as in remasters, or as these kind of nice little packaged boxes in terms of like classic minis. And, also through, again, online services like PS Plus, Xbox Live Gold, and this Switch Online service. That seems to be the trend now, and it's kind of a disturbing one, because once again I look at my PC and I find that I can run games that came out in 1995 or 96, and I can just put it into my DVD player or whatever and just run them, and they run great and fine, and I don't have to purchase the game again. And you have stuff like DOSBox, where you can run your old DOS games on your PC. They might need a bit of tweaking here and there. You might have to do a few bit of patches and stuff like that. But there it is. The PC is essentially, when it comes to backwards compatibility, the PC is just God in that regard. And, once again, I look at that, and then I look at the consoles, and I only see Microsoft. Again, it's tied to Xbox Live and your commitment to it to be able to play these games, and the third-party publishers, the first-party developers, what's the word I'm looking for? Their obligation to put the software onto that service, to make it backwards compatible. It's kind of depends on that, rather than you being able to take a game that you've already bought before and just slot it into a new system and play it on a better screen or whatever. And with stuff like the PlayStation Classic, it weakens the case for that. No, people are now looking at these boxes, and already people are talking about what games they want on the system other than the ones that had been announced. And more than likely, there'll probably be games that you could possibly already get on like the existing PlayStation Classics. You get those on your PSP or whatever. You can already purchase them there, much like that you can purchase quite a lot of games on your NES Classic on the Virtual Console, on your Wii or your Wii U or your 3DS. Same with the SNES Classic Mini, other than Star Fox 2, which again, almost daring to say you can look at the PC there as well because you can emulate all that kind of stuff. But, well, obviously when you're talking about that, it's obviously sort of legal shenanigans going on there, and that's kind of, so, I don't necessarily want to suggest that sort of thing. Again, with that, it sort of comes to whether you own the game or not already. So my feeling of the PlayStation Classic in terms of what you're getting, and again, you're getting it with the classic controllers. I know a lot of people saying, oh, I didn't come with the dual controller so we can play stuff like Ape Escape and stuff like that. And to me, the answer is obvious. It's based on the old design. It's based on the design at launch. It's a classic console that came out in 1994 and came with those controllers. The DualShock controllers sort of came further down the line. I don't know if it was before or around the time that the PlayStation 1 redesign sort of came out, the PS1, and you could get those DualShocks. It's not about that, it's about from the time that it launched. So, putting the DualShocks there kind of missed the point. Although, it wouldn't surprise me if further down the line they offered that option. For now, it's just regular controllers. And like I said, it's basically, it's all kind of concentrating on like the nostalgia value, the legacy of PlayStation. It is, and I'm sorry if I'm making a number of people feel really old out there, but it is at this point a retro console. It is, there's no denying it. That's why they're doing this. They're pretty much cashing in on the same thing that Nintendo and Sega are doing right about now. No, speaking of which, and you did kind of hear that Sega was sort of developing their sort of Mega Drive Mini to go along with that, and they were using games at first, which put a heck of a lot of people was like, no, we don't want to do that again. Apparently, they're kind of looking at that, and they're kind of pulled back on that now, and they're apparently charged the development of the Mega Drive Mini with a reputable Japanese software developer, which has got a lot of people excited, and they're all kind of wondering who it is, and a lot of people are kind of hoping to God that it's actually the same people who developed the Sega 3D Classics for the 3DS, because those were pretty damn great. And if someone like them was able to do it, then the Mega Drive Classic Mini, whatever it will be called when it comes out, could be a thing of beauty. My only concern really is, what's going to happen to backwards compatibility now that these devices are out. That said, I'm kind of interested to see how this plays out and if it works out for Sony, because they're doing pretty damn well already with the PlayStation 4. So, being able to hit the ground running with this is probably only going to be good for them. And the clues of how well it will do being, stuff like, the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy being number one and in the charts for months after its launch, because it's again, it's a really popular game on the really popular console that was pretty much proved that nostalgia is still pretty damn strong with people who own Sony consoles and played and loved their games. So it'll be interesting to see if that will be able to carry on that momentum and be another unlimited gated success for Sony. That said, once again, I have my fears about backwards compatibility, and that's all I need to say about that. So, Jesus Christ, that was a mouthful. I'm going to have to do some really heavy editing on this, but putting that aside, what are your thoughts on all of this? What's your thoughts on what I said about the Switch online service that's out now and how it compares to the other services and whether it's worth that price? What do you think of this recent trend of packing old consoles into little tiny packages with a whole bunch of games and selling off for a inflated price? And does that have any implications on backwards compatibility, or do you think I'm being a bit paranoid there? And yeah, if you can put your thoughts about that in the comments, that would be great. And so yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I kind of did promise an update, and I will do that. It's just that I've been so tired recently, and it's coming up to a sort of some point in my life, in all complete total honesty, and unfortunately at that point things may end up being produced, but who knows, things could get better. That's all I have to say about that. We just have to see, and not whatever the video I put up next, whether it would be another bit of news or an actual sort of bit of gameplay like I usually did before. Until then, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, or whatever you're going to be doing, and keep on playing, folks.